Hi everyone, Tom Hall here, Executive Director, Montclair Film and the Montclair Film Festival. Thank you so much for sticking around after that incredible screening of Kindred for our Q&A. Please welcome the director, Joe Marcantonio.
Hello.
And the star of the film, Tamara Lawrance.
Hi.
Thanks you guys so much for making the time to be with us. We really appreciate it. We're so grateful to have your film at the festival. This film really knocked me out. I'm a parent. I remember expecting a child and the energy of that, not as, of course, as a woman, but as a man. And I'm wondering if we could start this conversation. Montclair, I don't know if you know, but is known as sort of it's a place where families relocate when they want to, go to the schools and buy a bigger house and make more room. This is a family-oriented community just outside of New York City. So I'm wondering if we could start talking a little bit about the sort of anxiety that exists at the heart of this movie about having kids and sort of the pregnancy and the expectation of becoming a parent and family. Maybe Joe, you want to start talking a little bit in the screenwriting process or in directing this film, where that comes from for you as a filmmaker. And then Tamara, if you want to talk a little bit in your performance, that sort of anxiety that is built up. But maybe Joe, you can start.
The fact is I was writing this film having just had my second kid. So right now she is about to turn 4. So I guess about 3.5 years ago, we were developing the script. And it initially came just from a kind of a single sentence that I'd come up with about a family kind of kidnapping their daughter-in-law after their son dies because she's pregnant. And I had that one line in my head for years and years, and it was kind of buried away in a folder of ideas. And then in the process of developing a film idea, it jumped out after a while. I needed a new project to work on, a new script to work on, and because of everything I was going through, I thought I had a new angle to come at it from. And I think there's a lot of my own personal anxieties and worries and things I was going through, and it's kind of filled with personal terror and trauma. It's kind of core. And my co-writer Jason, who I've known for more than 20 years, as we were writing the first draft, he had twins who were born, very premature. They were 20-something weeks, and so they were in the hospital for the first 6 to 8 weeks of their lives. They were kind of stuck in an incubator almost. And the time he had off work that he'd booked, he spent basically with me writing this script. So there's a lot of that and what we were both kind of going through personally, kind of deep within the thing.
And Tamara, for you as a performer who has to deliver that anxiety to the audience, maybe a little bit about your own experience there.
I think Charlotte's anxiety around having a child was one of the main reasons I was actually drawn to the character, because I like parts that are subversive, and I think there's such a stereotype around women being innately maternal, and so I thought it was interesting and new to see a character that was very anti-maternity, and I thought it's important to tell this story because a lot of women, a startling amount actually, have peri or postnatal depression or psychosis, but that's never the stereotype you see around mothers. And so I really, I was really captivated by that anxiety. And I love children personally, but I also have a lot of children around me in my life and see the ways in which it's really difficult. And so I hope Charlotte sheds a light on that aspect of pregnancy.
Yeah, and Tamara, staying with you, the issue I think that people don't recognize is that there is this sort of duality about being a contemporary woman. It's always been there, but I think it's now more possible to express it in that we want to be free, we want to be able to build a career and build a life and do what we want, but we also want to be mothers. And there's these expectations, and this film really plays on the sort of social expectation of maternity in the form of the in-laws and the family having this sort of expectation of her as a mother. What did that sort of attract you as well? What are your feelings on the way that the film handles that tension?
Yeah, I think in light of what you're saying, that the house itself also provides a symbol of that entrapment, and in as a dichotomy to her desire to go to Australia, Charlotte wants to escape. She wants to be free. She's single. Margaret says to her, it's easy for you because you have no one. So we get the sense that Charlotte is a very autonomous, independent person. So to go from that extreme to being all of a sudden in a family that you don't want to be, and be expected to be raising a family, this notion is so far from everything that Charlotte knows. And remind me of other aspects of your question. Sorry.
Well, no, just that there's that tension between I want to be a mother, but I also want to be a free and independent woman. And the family is sort of handing down this tradition of you're going to be beholden to the child.
Exactly.
In our expectations of you.
Yeah, I think it's another thing in light of that this harks after is pro-choice versus pro-life. And I think that's also a tension as well, as you say, in that Charlotte understands that this is all that is left of Ben. I think that everybody in the house understands that. And so as much as she wants to continue their legacy by going to Australia and escaping and living the life that they planned for themselves together separately, I think that's the way in which she wants to honor Ben. But there's an expectation that actually the right thing to do is to have the child. And actually it's quite it's a very destructive thing they do to her, to deny her the choice. So she, as much as she might eventually come to a desire to keep the baby, she's not allowed out of the house. So she couldn't get an abortion if she even wanted to. So there's a very uncomfortable, for me, it was very uncomfortable knowing that, okay, the further along we go in the film, the further away Charlotte is from any agency, even though to the world's view, the closer we are to joy and a new lease of life, and you stepping into this milestone that every woman should look forward to.
And Joe, writing that from a woman's perspective, obviously, there's a grand cinematic tradition of heroines being gaslit. In fact, the movie Gaslight gave us the phrase gaslighting. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you could talk about, bringing this sort of feminist perspective to the character and these sort of issues that we're discussing, in feeling comfortable inhabiting that as a writer and a director. Were those films, you think of A Rosemary's Baby, although it has a very different ending, and these sort of gaslighting of women, stories that are so prominent. Can you talk a little bit about that tradition and maybe your place in it?
I think one thing I was very keen kind of from the beginning was to make sure the film wasn't a kind of a traditional kind of woman in peril film, which a lot of which kind of get their kicks from kind of watching a woman in kind of torment and watching someone go through the ringer. It's not that kind of film. And I think what you get from the slightly more intelligent film of that type, which we were kind of aiming towards, like Gaslight and like Rosemary's Baby and even Repulsion, is that you're dealing with a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional character. You understand the person, what their desires are. They're not just there to scream and run away and be scared by things. We're trying to deal with a real human being. And just through my own anxieties and worries and mental issues I'd been through and that loved ones had been through, I was aware of what a minefield, parenthood can be for a lot of people. And it was just something that I thought was a more interesting angle to take. I think there's an awful lot of dude with a problem films out there, and I'm a little bit bored of or at least when I was writing this, I was pretty bored of dude with a problem films. And I thought it was just a more interesting angle to to see it from a woman's perspective, you know.
Did you feel comfortable writing that part? I mean, I think you did a brilliant job, and like you said, it's a very three-dimensional, rich character. But did you have to find your way into it, or do you feel as a writer coming into roles you don't have that self?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd say is that, I mean, there's a few angles about this. Is that one is that I would consider myself a feminist. You know, I am married to a very strong and remarkable woman, and I have a daughter who I think is remarkable. And I think that I look at the females in my life and admire them greatly, and want to be able to portray them in realistic ways. And that's one part of it. I think realistically for me, a very important part of the process of screenwriting is this, you know, there's a bit of a romantic idea of screenwriting is that, you know, you sit at your typewriter and you write the whole thing and write the end, and then that's what gets made. And whereas the reality is, you know, the way I work, my process is that after we've written a script and we get something everyone's happy with, and we get the crew and the cast involved and the money's all set up, I do quite fairly intense rehearsals with the cast, and I'll go through with Tamara. We sat and we went through every single word of the script and analysed what we together thought Charlotte would say. Would she say house or building? You know, would she say vehicle or car? You know, everything from the kind of the most basic language up to the most severe language. And during that process, some things change, some things stay the same. But I think what happens in that is you get a more authentic and well-rounded approach. So it's not just me, you know, I'm not the kind of director or writer-director that, you know, Billy Wilder famously would stop a take halfway through because Jack Lemmon forgot to put a comma in, you know, and it doesn't really work like that for me. It's a little bit more of a collaboration, and I think it's about getting authenticity, not authorship, you know.
But you also have a really a strong formal voice as a filmmaker. I mean, it feels like very controlled, and the tension builds properly in post-production. Clearly, the edit, the timing of everything comes together so wonderfully to create that tension. So, you know, obviously you're involved in post-production and in the edit, but what is it, because you have such a great rehearsal period and you have such a great script, you bring it into the editing room after shooting. What's your experience there? And is that sort of critical to your building of the tone of the film?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of like a cameraman and an editor's worst nightmare in a lot of ways, because in my career, you know, I'm almost 40. I'm in my late 30s, and up until this point, I've never directed episodic TV. I've never directed a movie before. It's my first film. But what I have done is shot and edited and done graphics and graded and sound mixed hundreds, and I literally mean hundreds, of commercials and short films and brand films and online films, for everything from, like, I don't know, what's a boring one? A high street fashion store that no one's heard of, to a job for Paul McCartney, you know, like everything in between, you know. And that experience is what I brought to the table. So it meant that when you watch the film, all the cutaways of the stuffed animals and all the externals of the house and stuff, that's me. I shot that stuff myself without a crew. I'd stay late after the shoot, or I'd come at weekends on my own and grab the camera and the lenses, no assistant, no nothing. And I'd just wander around the house shooting dead spiders and whatever it might be. And I think it drives people slightly crazy, but I'm very comfortable doing that. And I'm like, I'd rather have that footage than not have it. And I've got an idea in my head about how it will work in the edit, you know? And equally, when we get to the edit, I had a wonderful editor, Fiona D'Souza, who and also my cameraman, let's not forget Carlos, who's super cool and very talented. And I was a very, very talented editor, Fiona. And it was just a close collaboration. You know, she did a wonderful job, and some things I helped with and some things I didn't. I think I try and be a collaborator rather than a dictator with these things, but sometimes I can't help myself and get a bit kind of overly controlling maybe. But I'm very happy with stylistically how it worked out. I think it looks cool. I think the coverage we got on the stuff is really good, and I'm really pleased with the performances. I think that the whole crew did a pretty remarkable job, really, considering the limitations. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have very much time. we shot the whole film in 23 and a half days or something, not a lot of time. And so considering everything, I think it's a pretty remarkable achievement, really.
Yeah, I agree. It really comes down to your vision and as a filmmaker to be able to pull that off. So congratulations. Tamara, I want to ask you a question. So I don't live in the UK. I live in the United States, but race is front and center in our country right now. And there is a race component between a Black woman and a white family in this film that plays very, very strongly, I think, in the United States right now in terms of race relations. But there's also a class component that I think reads differently over here to the film. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the racial dynamic as a performer and whether or not that inspired you in your portrayal of the character, and how you brought in that another sort of level of tension to the performance.
I don't think I did consciously bring a racial component, if I'm honest. I think it was like, okay, this is my partner. My partner's a white man. And in as much as Charlotte, I feel, is a character who is she's a person who's authentically herself. She's not afraid to show up as herself in any capacity, which I resonate with. I imagine in their history, they would have broached those things. But I don't know. I think maybe that's a question for the white actors, potentially, because...
Absolutely. I think that is definitely a two-way street, for sure.
It's a question for the white actors because I think as a Black woman in a relationship with a white man, I can't then go on to have a problem with his white family, if you understand what I mean.
Of course.
But his mother may have a problem with me on a subconscious level for whatever reason, in the character way, not Fiona. But yeah, so I don't think I brought a racial component to it. But I think, that wasn't in my head as I was playing it. I was playing, I'm in love with this person. This person has died. I'm now in, a big house that is so far away from anything I've known. So I think potentially class was more of an undercurrent because there is an estrangement between, it's hard, it can be hard to be in a relationship with someone who's grown up in a completely different world to you, and because of a lack of understanding or empathy that can come from the disparity of privileges, basically. And I think, and I've experienced that myself, and so I think I know that can show up as a problem, even in ways that you don't expect. But I think with Charlotte and Ben was trying to run away from that life. And that's, I think, was part of what fostered their love, is that they were both escaping from the worlds that they grew up in. And for whatever reason, despite being so very different people, aesthetically or externally, found harmony and understanding and companionship in a desire to let go of the status quo and what people tell you your life should be, and to go far away and start a new life with each other. And so I think that was the undercurrent for me in the character.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the class differences between our cultures. I just thinking as, and not to maybe dig myself a deeper hole, and maybe Joe, you want to address this, but, seeing an older of a certain generation, white woman keeping and manipulating a younger woman of color to, have a child maybe against her choice, reads very, very intensely in our political moment, I feel. Mm-hmm. It's not trying to make a statement, I don't think, but it certainly feels like part of the text.
Mm-hmm. I think the fact is that I think that we in the UK don't live in a perfect kind of racial culture by any stretch. You know, there's a lot of issues over here, but I think it's a very different issue than the States. You know, I think it equally class, I think over here is a very different issue than it is over there. And for me, it was always more of a kind of elitism issue more than it was a race issue, you know. And I think that Margaret would have disliked Charlotte, whatever race she was, whoever she was, you know. Her dislike for Charlotte was about her being an outsider, not her being a young black woman, you know. I think that's where the tension in the film originally comes from, and that's where her disdain. If her son is not going to be with the woman she chooses, he shouldn't be with anyone, you know. So that was always the core of the film for me. I think that there is a wider point about race, I think, in the casting, in that, you know, we didn't cast Tamara because she was the best young black actress we saw. We cast Tamara because she was the best young actress we saw. You know, I am not colorblind. You know, I'm aware that Tamara is a young black woman, but that wasn't why I cast her. I cast her because she's a remarkable actress. You know, and the proof's in the pudding. You know, I think that you can see from the result that it was the correct decision. And
what was your casting process like? How did you two sort of find each other?
What had happened was Jack, who plays Thomas, is one of the producers on the film, and he'd just done a TV series with Tamara as an actor called The Long Song, which is really good, and everyone should check it out. And I hadn't seen it at the time, but I met Jack for a drink. We were talking about casting, and there's an awful lot of not to be disparaging or anything, but there's an awful lot of young, particularly British actresses that all kind of look the same, and they've all got long straight hair and big googly eyes, and they all look very pale and kind of like friendly and pretty, and it's like it just didn't feel right for the part. I was saying that, like, I don't really, you know, I was kind of struggling. And he was like, "Oh, you should speak to Tamara." And rather than just get, you know, 100 people to go on tape, you know, I'd rather meet 5 people that I find interesting, you know, and spend an hour with them. So that's what we did. And Alice and I, who was a casting agent, we sat in the room and saw 5 people, and Tamara was the last person to come in. And within about 3 minutes, we looked at each other and were just like, right, okay, you know, this is it. You know, we got the person here. It's just about finding that authenticity in the person, you know, and it can come from someone who's able to share personal experience, or it can come from someone who has the imagination to propel themselves into a situation they've never been in. You know, you never really know where the actor's coming from. You know, it's a bit of a kind of hocus pocus going on, really. But we kind of knew straight away that she was the right person for us.
And Tamara, Joe has confessed to being a first-time feature director. You have a lot of experience as an actor. How did you find working together on set?
I mean, I don't know.
Terrible.
No. I mean, a lot may be an exaggeration, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. Joe is my kind of director, collaborative. I don't think you're controlling. I think you're specific, which is always useful. But there was room to discuss and to challenge and to suggest other things. And also, I think you can see in the film there was room for improvisation and or ad-libbing, as it were, and those moments at the tail ends of scenes or in between scenes where you see sort of examples of like flashbacks of Ben and Charlotte, or Margaret and Thomas playing the piano and stuff like that. You know, there's an element of realness and freedom to have private moments which kind of create substance in films like this. And I think that's Joe's genius. And Joe's also very, not to make you sound bland, but just like normal. Like, it's just, you're strange, but it's also, we can go to the pub and have a drink. You know, we can we can talk about other things outside of the film. So I felt very safe and comfortable, and it was a very intimate cast. Jack I'd known before. And also when you're working with someone that you, so working with Jack and Fiona, both of whom I admire, and Jack vouches for Joe. So by proxy, I already knew I was gonna like Joe. But yeah, having not that much time was also really good because it built the momentum, and I felt like every day there was a lot of focus, and yeah, it was enjoyable. I enjoy working with Joe, and I would work with Joe again.
The thing to bear in mind as well is that we shot the film in very rural Ireland. We're in the middle of the Midlands of Ireland. In a little place called Stradbally near Portlaoise, which is basically only famous because it's got a giant prison in it. It's kind of, about an hour and a half out of Dublin in the kind of middle of nowhere. And the reality of Tamara living on her own in the middle of nowhere in Ireland near a big house.
Yeah.
And played into the part in a certain way. And equally for me, I was on my own pretty much in a house in the middle of nowhere in Ireland as well. We were all kind of like living the film in our own funny, weird kind of way while we were shooting it. It was quite a strange experience.
So what's next for the film? Do you guys know the release plans here in the US, and how can our audience tell their friends to see the film and find it again?
Well, the wonderful people at IFC are releasing on the 6th of November in the US. It will be out in the UK the beginning of 2021, so there's a bit of a head start for the States, so hopefully you can spread the word and let other people check it out. And yeah, hopefully enough people to go and see it that we get to make another one at some point. Not a sequel or anything, but I've had enough. So as much as I like being in Stradbally, I'm not sure I can go back there quite yet.
I want to thank you both so much, Tamara, Joe, for being with us and taking the time. I really appreciate it. The film's terrific. We wish you great success with it and look forward to seeing what's next.
No worries. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.